try to decide whether there is some being that exists on a different plane than we do that we cannot perceive. I mean, that just seems like an easy way to describe why it happened.
Well, I think we have enough examples of things that cannot be observed with the human body, but can be observed with instruments, radio waves as an example. That illustrates there are things that cannot be observed with our 5 senses. We have 5 senses. They are very limited. Let's take the sense of sight. You can see the color spectrum, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet. But there are things beyond our little color spectrum in both directions, right? X-rays, radio waves, microwaves. There are things in the same electromagnetic spectrum that are way beyond the ability of our eye to pick them up, right? Bugs, for instance, see a different part of the spectrum than we do. They can see ultraviolet. We cannot see that. The fact that we cannot see it does not prove it doesn't exist. We may be able to get an instrument to detect it.
But the difference being that we don't say that they're just, say, fictional D waves. We just say, okay, these exist. We can't see it. We can't prove it's there, but they exist. I mean, that's like saying God exists, but you can tell there's no physical way to detect it at all.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Well,
the reason we believe
if we develop,
because
but our knowledge of this spectrum expanded when we detected these other waves.
Right.
We
didn't
say, oh, we've run across an
Sure.
X-ray, let's put it here. We've run across ultraviolet, let's put it here. We didn't just say, it's all there, I know it's there because I believe it's there, and it just happened to be there when we finally tried it.
I would argue that the existence of X-rays was proven theoretically, or was demonstrated theoretically, before it was proven actually.
No, that's exactly the inverse. They were discovered accidentally when they generated them from Crookes tubes and they haven't exposed film in them. He was getting X-rays all along and didn't know what they were. Look at Madame Curie. She discovered
X-rays is a bad example. She died, right. X-rays is a bad example, but there are many things. Existence of higher chemicals, for instance, beyond 92, that were predicted before they were seen.
Right.
Many have still never been seen. You know, they just
because there was a link.
Sure.
They knew that there were existing elements and having something else.
Until we develop a prayer meter to detect God speaking to us or us speaking to God, there is no way to detect that.
Right.
I'm saying it is pure religion. I've admitted it all along. Creationism is a religion. What I want is the evolutionists to admit they have a religion also. They don't know what exploded. They don't know who supplied the energy. They don't know how the life got here from dirt. And they don't know how the life began to all of a sudden be able to reproduce itself. Reproduction is a complex process. DNA is extremely complex. And if you're welcome to think that it happened by chance, but I'm saying we haven't observed it. Nobody's been able to duplicate it in the laboratory. Making an amino acid is not making life.
But there's no physical existence proving the existence of God either,
I agree.
Except for human.
I agree. So my whole argument is the way we're teaching our kids in our grade schools and junior highs and high schools is unconstitutional. We have a state-established religion. The taxpayers are all paying for this view and only this view to be presented. That's unfair, it's not right, and we ought to show both. Or if you could think of a third one, then let's show all three. I think if the kids are smart enough to know, somebody says, well, which brand of creation? Do you think the world came on the back of a giant duck that flew down here from some planet? Well, the kids could see that's dumb. But if you want to teach that, then let's teach that. If there's 30 different varieties of creation accounts, well, then teach all 30. Why have we only included this one? The textbooks will say, second grade books. I got one, it's packed away, but I got second grade book. Boys and girls, dinosaurs roamed the earth 70 million years ago. It'll say that like it's a fact in the second grade books. Okay.
What about the second grade books?
It should say scientists believe that.
Yeah,
It should say one theory is that dinosaurs roamed the earth millions of years ago. Another theory, which more than half of the U.S. population believes, more than half of the people believe, that dinosaurs did not roam the earth millions of years ago. That they've always been with man, and there may be a few still around.
But the population is, I mean, that doesn't make it so. Believing does not make it so.
I agree for evolution also.
That's right.
So why do we only teach this? Why does the second grade book say dinosaurs roamed the earth 70 million years ago when it may indeed not be true?
But don't you think that they should be taught in two different subjects instead of in the same classroom?
I think evolution is not part of science. This is part of a philosophy. But it's been stirred in with science to the point where people think it belongs there. And the same analogy could be made where beer is always advertised at football games. Right? Beer has nothing to do with football. Show me what beer has to do with football. Or any sporting event.
We'd be in real trouble. We'd be in real trouble if we limited ourselves to teaching only those things that we knew everything about. We couldn't, no one knows how
Nothing
sperm fertilize eggs. No one knows how that really works. Like you said yourself, no one knows, and I know this to be true because I did some engineering, but no one knows what electricity is.
Right.
We have to teach people something about electricity. We
Sure.
can't just leave it out because we don't know it all.
So you should- yeah,
You've got to
you
start somewhere and say, you decide for yourself. If you're a 6th grader and somebody says dinosaurs roamed the earth 70 million years ago, like you said before, kids aren't stupid. Some kid's going to say, well, wait a minute, how do these rocks get this way? How did this happen? How did that happen? If they believe it and it becomes their belief system, well, maybe they'll become geologists. But if not, they won't. I mean, I just don't see this monolithic plot to change people's lives with this thing that doesn't even really exist. I mean, you're not even describing evolution properly, let alone...
Oh, wait. What have I described about evolution that is improper?
You're claiming that it has this coherent view. You get 3 evolutionists in a room at any one time, and you'll have 3 different theories of evolution.
Yeah, and they each can prove the other 2 are
Well,
wrong.
that's right. So there is no monolithic view where they all say this or they all say that or all
Same
secondary
with
books say
Christians. You get 3 in a room.
dinosaurs.
Oh, yeah, get 3 Christians in a room, too. The only one that's right is me. Now, that's been proven over and over. Okay.
You know, and that's my only problem is that it's a straw man. You build this boogeyman
No.
and then you shoot it down, and it's just not the case.
I think that we would have to go back to our definition of evolution. Is it microevolution? Then everybody agrees with that. As far as the macro theory of evolution, that this process started 20 billion years ago, this is the way it is presented. This is not scientifically supported. It is not supported by consensus of the American people. Most people do not believe this. Majority opinion doesn't mean anything.
That doesn't mean it's not true, though.
Okay, hold it now. What you just said, listen now.
The world population doesn't have a consensus for the existence of your Christian God, but that doesn't
Absolutely.
mean it doesn't exist, so we've got to have a
But
consensus.
you watch the arguments on creation, evolution, and inevitably, some evolutionists will say, but the majority of scientists believe this.
Scientists, they're not the public.
Doesn't he?
Oh, scientists are are they infallible?
No, but there are people who study the thing that have an opinion. The average person in the population doesn't know squat about evolution. That's why your average drug dealer that you're blaming evolutionary theory on isn't going to say, yeah, I'm selling crack cocaine because I believe that evolution gives me the right to do this. He's not going to say that T.H. Huxley or Darwin supports the theory of survival of the fittest. That's why I'm going to gun you down with an Uzi. I mean, that's just maybe. That's ridiculous.
It goes back to your philosophical worldview. There's 2 things we haven't covered that we've been asked to cover here. Carbon dating. And I forgot the other one already, but we only got 7 minutes left, so we'll have to hurry. The what? Dendrochronology. Okay, we'll get into carbon dating, kind of will include that, if we can cover it as quickly here. Radioactive elements, and there are 7 or 10 of them, I don't know how many exactly, but we're going to take some of the simple ones. Carbon-14 is radioactive. Carbon-14 is formed in the upper atmosphere. The Earth has a layer of air around it, approximately 200 miles thick. It floats around all the time, it varies, but about 200 miles thick. Skip the details, I'm going to call it 200 miles. When sunlight or starlight or radiation strikes the atmosphere, it adds excess energy to some of the molecules. Nitrogen can take on extra particles and become carbon-14. Carbon-14 then is radioactive. It's very unstable. You can walk past it with a Geiger counter and you hear click, 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 click as particles fly off. It is falling apart. It falls apart. They watched it for 3 days in the laboratory and decided that it falls apart. About half of it will fall apart. The half-life is about 5,730 years, which I have on my chart. Half-life of C14 is about 5,730 years. That is based on a 3 or 4 day extrapolation, which I'm not going to argue with that. That's probably correct. But you'll find people that say it's 6,000, some say it's 5,690, you know, it floats around, but approximately 6,000 years for the half-life of carbon. Then, that carbon-14 that is produced in the atmosphere gets mixed in with the other gases, and it ends up hooking up to oxygen, becoming CO2, carbon dioxide. Well, plants breathe carbon dioxide, and they make it part of their tissue. And then an animal eats the plants. All the while, this carbon is falling apart. It's radioactive. Now, carbon-14 is very rare. There is only